ನೋಡ್ ಅದೇ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ.
ನಮ್ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಆನ್ ಮಾಡದ? A very good afternoon. On behalf of Raju Vakkaligara Sangha and Bangalore Institute of Technology, we welcome all for 3-day webinar on tips for healthy and safety well-being, organized by Women's Grievance Redressal Cell and College Internal Complaints Cell (BIT) as a mark of Women's Day celebration. Feminism is not about making women strong. Women are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. Now, I request Dr. Pramila P., Chairman, WGRC, to say a few words on the event. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vidya. Good afternoon to one and all. It gives me immense pleasure in celebrating this Women's Day through our college governing committees, Women Grievances Redressal Cell, and College Internal Complaints Committee. I extend a warm welcome to one and all, to all the participants, and to our principal and guests on behalf of WGRC and CICC. We were unable to schedule this event on March 8th as we had another similar program then. Hence, we had to arrange now. So, International Women's Day is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. This day also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality. So, celebrating women's achievements and increasing visibility while calling out inequality in key. So, therefore, this is a key which calls us for to build workplace where women thrives. Also, elevate visibility of women creatives, improve equality for women in technical field, then forge women's empowerment worldwide and celebrate women forging changes. With this, also empower women's choices in health as well. And also, we know that the International Women's Day theme for this 2022 also highlights on the importance of challenging biases and misconceptions in the interest of creating a more inclusive and gender equal world. So now I request all participants to attend this program and get benefited by the awareness session for health and safety well-being. And also our speakers on all the 3 days will focus on the key points and remind us to show how society is advancing with the involvement and dedication of women capability. So over to Vidya to continue.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I request our beloved principal, Dr. Ashwath M.U., to address the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. In fact, I'm very happy the Women Grievances Redressal Cell and the College Internal Complaints Committee have been active in looking after the well-being and safety of all the employees and students over the years. About a few days back, I was just having a discussion with the chairperson that there are no grievances from anybody. So that's a good news. as per the directions of the All India Council for Technical Education and the university authorities, normally there will be a routine mandatory complaints required to take care of the employees and look at if they have any grievances. So in this connection, the committee members are doing a good job. In fact, not only addressing the grievances, but generally they are also organizing some awareness sessions and health-oriented sessions on a frequent basis. So today also, can I request the host to mute all the participants, please? So this program, I would like to compliment the coordinators, Dr. Pramila and Dr.
Kindly unmute the principal. Principal's speech has not been visible. Not audible. Principal's speech is not audible.
Hello? Is it
Audible,
clear?
sir. Yeah, you can. We can hear.
Now you are audible, sir.
Okay. So I have to repeat the whole thing?
We didn't hear you anything.
Okay. Okay. So I was just talking about the initiative taken by the Women's Grievance Cell and Internal Complaints Committee about the activities, mandatory activities required as per the AICTE and VTU. So these teams are very active. In fact, this program was planned on International Women's Day, but somehow it was postponed. So I'd like to compliment the coordinators, Dr. Pramila and Dr. Rupa, and also the coordinators, Professor Sudha, Gunavathi, Vidya, Akshana, and all other members of both the committees for taking initiative in organizing this 3 days program on health and safety well-being for the employees and also students. The speakers, resource persons, Dr. Janani, Dr. Karishma, thank you very much. The police inspector Lakshmi Mendigeri also has accepted to be on with us on 6th. I thank all of them, and the management is also, we have now an elected body of representatives from the state, Rajya Vakkaligara Sangha. Now it is headed by Dr. C.N. Balakrishna, the president of RVS, Konappa Reddy, Secretary General, and R. Prakash, Treasurer, and our Chairman, Governing Council, BIT, M. Putswamy. They are also taking a lot of interest. In fact, they have made several visits to Bangalore Institute of Technology from January and inquiring about the safety and well-being of all the employees, not only the lady faculty and students, but also generally about all the staff. And I thank on behalf of both the committees for them and for their concern. And generally all the grievances will be addressed on a frequent basis. And in this connection also, in fact, in most of the industries, if I keep observing in the last few years, there are a lot of programs the corporates also are organizing for the women and lady students on safety and fitness, well-being, and also gender equality programs are also planned throughout the industry. In fact, some of the corporates, they do a regular recruitment drives only for women. And this is a good sign that they are treated equally and more than equal in some of the places. So good in our college also, in many of the departments, the ratio of men and women, when I look at it, there are a lot of women. So they are strong, and in BIT, definitely the women folk is very strong, and they are safe also. So I once again congratulate and compliment the organizers for this program, and I'm sure all the participants will get benefited at the end of the 3 days interaction with the resource people. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Any society that fails to motivate women is not modern. Today, we are here to listen to our renowned speaker on Mind Your Health by Dr. Janani, consultant psychiatrist, Bengaluru. Here is a brief introduction about Madam. Dr. Janani completed her MBBS from Vinayaka Missions, Salem. She did her psychiatric medicine from Christian Medical College, Bangalore. Practices hypnotherapy extensively. She runs her own private establishment, Shraddha, dedicated to treating people with mental illness in Mandaveli. She is a visiting consultant in hospitals like Chennai Meenakshi, BSS, GEM Multi-Speciality Hospital, and TTK. Her areas of interest include depression, anxiety, teenage problems. Regularly writes in various magazines like Kungumam, Kumudam, dedicated to mental illness. She has appeared in many interviews and talk shows on national television. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, thank you so much. It's very humbling to be amongst such a wonderful crowd. It's also very empowering to be in a forum with predominantly women. With no offense to the men, but it's always nice to be able to talk about women, to talk about the importance of mental health, especially in women, because I feel this is one area that unfortunately is very, very stigmatized, especially in our country. However, things are changing, and I'm very happy that things are slowly changing. And I'm hoping to give you a bird's eye view as to the importance of mental health, especially in women. More so because we tend to don so many different roles, isn't it? So here I go, and I'm open to questions at the end of my presentation. Please feel free to share your viewpoints. If you have any doubts at all, I'm more than willing to discuss it. Okay? So the topic head is Mind Your Health, right? So this whole seminar is to talk about why mental health is important and why mental health is especially important when it comes to women. So when I say mental health, what am I talking about, or what am I referring to? So according to the WHO definition of mental health is basically social, emotional, cognitive functioning without any disease formation that's happening there, right? So psychologically, socially, you're well, there's a well-being, which denotes or which comes out in the way we think, we feel, and we act. And this is also a way of assessing as to how we cope with day-to-day stressors, how we relate to one another, how we make our choices, and whether our choices are healthy, and basically how we lead a very emotionally stable life. So again, why is mental health important? To start off with a very small example. Let's say you're physically in the prime of your life. You've got all the physical attributes that are very much required. You are fit, you're fine. However, if your mind isn't into it, let's say you're feeling low, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling amotivated, do you think that you would be able to carry out your daily functioning like you normally do, your different roles that you normally would be able to carry out? The answer is definitely no. So, unlike how people feel physical health is more important than mental health, I'm sitting here to tell you that it's actually the other way around. I'm a proponent of, putting mental health as the crest jewel of our health, in the sense as the crown, because unless this is working normally, no matter how fit or fine we are, no matter however many diseases we do not have, we're still not going to be able to function properly. So if you look at statistics in general of mental health issues in women, there has been a sharp increase in all these illnesses post-COVID as in after the onset of COVID. So as a lot of people spoke about COVID as a pandemic, people also recognized that the second pandemic in line was actually the mental health pandemic. And the mental health pandemic was clearly seen to be much more in women all around. This is globally, right? This is not just in India. In India, the statistics of illnesses like depression, anxiety, phobia, obsessive compulsive disorders was shockingly high, especially in women of all different classes, more so in the economically deprived class. There was an increase in the rate of suicide, especially in women post the pandemic. So generally, we need to understand that men and women are genetically, biologically wired differently, and hence the famous books, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So they have a biological basis. So our neural chemistry, the way our brain works right from the beginning of life is very, very different. Men are tuned differently and women are tuned differently, right? So this is something that we all know as, as a joke, right? I mean, I'm sure many of you all would have gotten the feeling that it's only your female friends who somehow sometimes really understand what you're talking about. The men seem to have difficulty in actually figuring out why you're making a fuss about what you're doing, right? So it's because the way we emote, we women emote, the way we perceive hormonally, biologically, we're very, very different. So it's different even in our neural connections. Right. In India, if you look at the statistics, like I was saying, it's actually gone up from 17.8%. It's almost as high as 50%, right, of depression that we're seeing, especially in women now, closely followed by anxiety, which is also as high as about a 40%. And unfortunately, in our country, the ratio of mental health professionals, especially psychiatrists like me, to the number of people who have a mental illness is extremely low, right? So the number of psychiatrists who actually come out of a medical college on a yearly basis in a particular state is very, very low. Fortunately, we also have other mental health professionals who work with us, who help us in our day-to-day work. We have psychologists, we have counselors, we have, health coaches. We have so many people, motivational speakers. So everybody plays a role, right? This is not something that, this is not a one-man's game, right? So this is not for us to be alienated. We work as a team, and it's only as a team where we find that there is a holistic approach. So when we talk about gender and mental health, like I was mentioning, sorry. Okay. So there are varied patterns of illnesses that you also see amongst men and women. While in men, you see more of externalizing disorders. So by the term externalizing, I mean men sorting to alcohol, men sorting to drugs, men sorting to gambling, men sorting to aggression, right? So the illnesses that are seen in men are slightly different from the illnesses that are seen in women. Women are more, in women, the illnesses are more tuned inwards. So there's more anxiety, there's more depression, there's more suicidal ideations, there's more low self-esteem, low self-confidence, etc., which is seen in women, right? So there are various theories that have been put forward for this. And like I said, these are all formed on the basis of the fact that our brains itself are wired differently. So if you look at who exactly is at a risk of mental ill health, you will find that as women, like I started off by saying, we don different roles, we play different roles, right? So, for example, many women in this group right now would be mothers, they would be wives, they would be daughter-in-laws, they would be daughters, they would be sisters, they would be professionals. So we don so many different roles, and in our society, in the Indian society, irrespective of whether you're a working woman or not, you are supposed to fulfill certain obligations at home, right? So again, no disrespect to the men in this group, and I'm not trying to generalize. Each family is very different. I now know of a lot of men who pitch in and help their wives or their partners or their sisters or mothers, etc. But if you look at it largely, right, the subset of the population that we live in is still, we live in a very patriarchal society, isn't it? So if you go down, if you look at the lower socioeconomic status, it's still a very patriarchal society where men is always considered higher than the woman. The woman is supposed to take care of the children. She's supposed to look after the house, irrespective of whether she's forced to go to work or not. So in general, we have so many different roles that we need to fulfill so perfectly that there is a tendency for all of us to fall into these sort of mental illnesses. So environmental factors like stressful life events, let's say a death in the family, death of your spouse, death of a child, death of a relative, that's extremely stressful. Any sort of physical health condition that you may already have, having children itself can be very stressful. An arranged marriage or any marriage for that matter is itself difficult because there's a sudden change in your psychosocial environment. You move into a different house, you move into a person's house with completely different sort of belief system. So there's a lot of adjusting. So traditionally in the Indian families, the woman still goes to the husband's house. Yes, things are changing now, I agree. But like I said, I'm talking about the general population where the woman is asked to move into the husband's house and not vice versa. Again, for most religions, right? I know of some religions where it works the other way around. And even if women are equally or even more educated than the men in the family, we find that women are generally given a lower income. So this again stems from the way the society works, isn't it? So then you have genetic factors. There are genetic factors that make people more or less susceptible to certain mental illnesses, right? So, if somebody in the family has a mental illness, there's a higher risk of somebody else in the family, a child in the family, procuring that sort of a mental illness, right? So genetic factors play a huge role. Lifestyle factors, if you're somebody who copes by smoking, drinking, poor eating habits, poor sleeping habits, that in itself can cause a variety of mental issues. The fact, like I said, gender plays an important role, whether you're male, female, how you perceive issues at hand, what triggers you off, right? What ticks you off as such. So that is also another very important, role here. Resilience are the ability for us to bounce back from hard times, right? So how resilient are we? Are we built to be very resilient, or are we somebody who quickly goes into a corner, somebody who's very pitiful of themselves, somebody who finds life too difficult to go on, somebody who's stuck? So it depends on how well you're able to move past your issues. So this in itself is an explanation as to why women face more mental health issues. She has to care for children. She has to meet her husband's needs. In a lower socioeconomic status, she fends for the families. I know of umpteen women who take care of the entire family's financial workings because the husband would be an alcoholic, the husband would be good for nothing, and they are married for life. They are not allowed to separate from the husband. They are not allowed to leave the husband. And societally, they are not received back by the parents. So there's so much of stigma associated with the divorced woman. Still so much of issues going on, isn't it? So you have to take care of the household cleaning. You have to care for the sick. If you have in-laws or somebody else in the family who's sick, it's the wife or the daughter-in-law or the sister or the mother who's doing most of the work. And again, in a socially deprived community, there's very little money coming in. People work, let's say, in farming, or I've seen women who work as, in these buildings, right? They carry these heavy loads. They have a child at the back, typically like this. They tie the child in the side and they still work. It's amazing to see those women being able to handle such heavy weights and take care of the child, right? So that responsibility eventually falls on the woman's lives, isn't it? So what are some of the common mental health issues that are seen in women? Depression, anxiety, anything that comes as postpartum. Postpartum is in post-delivery. You have a premenstrual syndrome, which occurs, just prior to your periods. You have what is called as a bipolar disorder. You have borderline personality disorder. You have eating disorders where you see in young teens nowadays. So what is depression? So again, if you look at the term depression, it's a very loosely used term, isn't it? So it's a term that everybody is nowadays using, especially when you feel like one day in the week you're feeling low, and then you're worried that you're feeling depressed. But a biological depression, or a depression where we consider it to be a mental illness, is where there is a persistent feeling of sadness, of emptiness, of hopelessness. The person is so fatigued, they don't want to get up from bed. They're so unmotivated that they don't want to do anything. They have no interest in looking after themselves, be it personal hygiene, be it dressing up, be it doing something for themselves. So there's there are appetite changes, there are sleep changes, there's a lot of hopelessness. Generally, that life is not worth living. So you have a lot of suicidal ideations, thought of death. You have trouble focusing, trouble concentrating. So when these sort of symptoms persist, so please focus here when I use the term persist. So on a one-off day feeling like this, say once in 3-4 months, is perfectly fine, right? As long as this is not a pattern that continues, in such a way that all your functionality, your sleep, your appetite, everything goes for a toss. Only then do we consider the person to be depressed. So when I say anxiety, what am I talking about? Anxiety literally means that you're always on the edge. You're constantly worried. You're not even sure what you're worried about. I'm sure this is something that most of you can sort of relate to, because 90% of the people who come into my clinic are people who have anxiety. Right? So they're constantly worried. They're worried about their family, they're worried about their job, they're worried about the future, they regret the past. So it's basically that the mind is not still. The mind is always focusing. It's full of negative thoughts. They're very sure that something negative is going to happen. They're restless. They're not able to sleep. They're not able to eat. They're not able to focus. So that is anxiety. You find people biting their nails. You find people shaking their legs. You find people doing this, they'll be constantly fidgeting when they talk to you. So these are all signs of anxiety. A quick look at what we call as borderline and bipolar disorder, because again, I find that the term bipolar disorder is very loosely used. However, a word of caution, bipolarity in its original sense is a major mental illness. So this is not, it's not good to tag somebody with this particular diagnosis unless we're very sure. So bipolar, meaning two poles. So on one side, you have somebody going into a depression, and at the same time, after a while, you'll find that the person goes into the opposite pole of a depression. So the mood in depression is low. On the opposite end of the spectrum, they're very high. High as in they're either ecstatic, they're exuberant, they're extremely happy for no reason, or they're extremely irritable. And both ends make them extremely dysfunctional. There is no functionality, there is no proper sleep-wake cycle, there isn't any sort of, there's impulsivity, there's aggression, it could be any of this. So the two poles are what is known as bipolarity. So who is susceptible to bipolarity? Genetically, yes, if you have somebody in the family who's had it, you are at a risk, but not, it doesn't mean that you have to get it definitively, right? And on the same spectrum, you have something called borderline personality, where, so personality is basically, all of us have personalities, right? So a personality disorder is when you find that there are constant issues in interpersonal relationships. You find that they're not able to cope with stresses of life. You find that they have mood swings. You find that they're not able to function in a social setting. That's when you have a personality disorder. And there are various personality disorders in which borderline is generally more often seen in women as opposed to men, where they're extremely impulsive, they make rash decisions. And of course, this comes with its own set of issues. Right. So this is again an area where a lot of women seem to be having issues, right? So which is postpartum, meaning post your delivery. So in your when a woman delivers, there are a lot of hormonal changes that are happening within her body. There's a sudden increase in one hormone, there's a sudden decrease in another hormone, then there's another hormone working so that there is breast milk that is secreted. So there's a lot of change that's going on. And apart from that, the woman also has been given the responsibility of looking literally after another soul, isn't it? So all of a sudden you have this baby who you have to look out for day and night. So there's a lot of stress that the woman undergoes. So again, a lot of women tend to go into a postpartum depression, which is again, symptoms where they have crying, they have withdrawal, they can't sleep, they doubt their parenting skills, they feel very hopeless, they feel very guilty, they can have physical aches and pains. Sometimes they even have thoughts of harming the baby, which again is not intentional. Right? Again, there is a difference between what we call as a postpartum blue versus a postpartum depression. In a postpartum blue, which is much, much more common, happens immediately after delivery, where most women are struggling to sort of cope with this new setting, because all of a sudden you have, like I said, a new soul to look after. So it's a lot of responsibility. Some may be ready, some may not be ready, some may not be as ready as they thought they should be, stuff like that. So a postpartum blue is something that wanes off after a while. However, a postpartum depression tends to occur and it stays. Similarly, you have both your premenstrual dysphoric disorder as well as your menopausal issues. So a lot of women in their menopause also have a lot of mood changes that occur, more so of depression, again due to the hormonal changes that are taking place in the body. So that's again an area where women face a lot of issues. Similarly, you have young women in their reproductive age group who have issues, just after the ovulation period. So which is like the 14th, after the 14th or the 15th day of your cycle. So let's say you have a cycle of 30 days. Your first 15 days is called the follicular phase, and then the last 15 days are called your luteal phase. So the last part of your luteal phase is when you have your periods or your bleeding phase. So 15 or 14 days, depending on the length of your cycle, after the start of your period, a lot of women can have a lot of mood changes. So this is again called as you've heard of this common terminology, young women nowadays use, I'm PMSing. So this is something that they all talk about. Do I have PMS? So PMS is basically premenstrual dysphoric disorder. I'm seeing a lot of young girls with eating disorders. So either there is obesity and overeating on one end of the spectrum versus undereating and feeling guilty about eating and binge eating and then completely purging. Purging isn't trying to get the food out by either trying to vomit, putting their finger, retching, by taking laxatives so that they don't put on weight. So there's an intense fear of putting on weight. There are a lot of bodily issues about my nose looks big, my eyes look this, my hips look like that, my breasts are not good enough, etc., etc. So there are a lot of bodily misconceptions that young women have. So again, if you find that predominantly you have eating disorders in women as opposed to men. See, these are all very gendered sort of mental illnesses that we see. And like I said, apart from all this, the issues also arise because once a woman is branded with a mental illness, we find that most families tend to disown the woman, especially if the mental illness is along with a comorbid physical illness, and that again becomes an issue. So there's a lot of abandonment by families, there's homelessness, there is high levels of sexual abuse in women who have mental illness, right? So generally, we women nowadays, with the rising alarming rates of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, this, you add mental illness to that, then, it gets even more. And like I started off by saying, the stigma is extremely high as such towards women, especially towards women with mental illness, as opposed to a man with a mental illness. Unfortunately, our setup is like this. So having looked at the very gray realities in a woman's life, what are we going to do about it? How do we look after our mental health? How do we prevent, if we can, any of these illnesses in us, right? So how do we cope with our day-to-day stress, with our day-to-day functioning? Because all of us are stressed one day or the other. I'm sure there's no woman or man in this entire group who's going to come and tell me I've never been stressed in my life, isn't it? So we all undergo stress either on a daily basis or on a one-off basis. There are, we have our good days and we have our bad days. So if we want to maintain our mental health predominantly in a more positive fashion, what is it that we have to do? First thing that we have to do is start taking steps. So mental health, like our physical health, also requires work. So this is something that is a concept that is new to a lot of people, because like I said, mental health is taken for granted. Only when you realize that you're going somewhere into a different direction in terms of, let's say, a depression or an anxiety, is when it's like a wake-up call for so many people, men and women, right? People don't realize that mental health also needs work, like how we exercise for our physical health, like how we take blood tests on a regular basis for our physical health. We, what is the word? We immediately go to the doctor if there is a physical ailment. We look into it. We make sure we're fine. We make sure we get back to what we need to, right? So similarly, please understand that mental health also requires work. So what are some of the good ways to maintain mental health? The first thing is to have a proper schedule. So a schedule would require a proper sleep-wake time. Again, this is probably something that your grandmothers would have told you about: sleep early, early to bed, early to rise. But you know what? There's a lot of scientific basis to what they're saying. This is not something that's just come down centuries. People are just saying it like that. No. Nowadays, with the advent of mobile phones and social media activity, which is tremendously increased post-COVID, we find that one of the most common complaints, or I find one of the most common complaints that people come to me with, is insomnia, or the inability to go to sleep or remain asleep or getting up early. So basically a disruption in their sleep-wake cycle. So it's very, very important to get proper sleep. Why is it important to get proper sleep? So what if I sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning and get up at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So the reason behind trying to go to sleep early and waking up early is because we have certain glands in the brain, like the pineal gland, which is located somewhere here, which releases a hormone called melatonin. This hormone is the hormone that makes sure that you get a proper, qualitatively good sleep, which is uninterrupted, right? So this melatonin hormone will only get secreted in the night, and especially get secreted when it's dark. So it needs to be mostly in the night. So our biological clock is tuned that way. So not only the melatonin hormone that requires secretion, which is interrupted if you're watching an iPad or a mobile phone, a lot of the reparative processes in our body takes place when we're asleep. So meaning the repair processes, the cells, the proteins, so many different processes that are going on in our body on a daily basis tend to happen. The restoring and the repairing tends to happen only during our sleep. So it's extremely important. And it's not, it's vital to our health in terms of both physical and mental health to get adequate sleep. This adequate sleep you will get if you have a proper schedule. And why is it important to get up early in the morning? Because again, there are a lot of scientific studies that show when you rise 2 hours before sunrise. So typically in India, if you say 5:30, sun rises during summer, then at least by 4, if you get up and you have some sort of a meditative process that you can do, any sort of a spiritual process, the heights of the spiritual process, or our brains, our brains are wide awake in the morning. And they say any sort of spiritual practice works best when you do it in that period. So according to a Vedic system, we call it the Brahma Muhurtam, isn't it? So that time during which in the morning where your consciousness is awake, your mind is extremely active. So any sort of practice, let's say you're studying in the morning at 4 o'clock, they say you kind of, you will be able to go through so much more than when you try studying late into the night. Of course, there are people who believe that they do well after everybody in the house sleeps, etc., etc. But generally, studies have shown that the morning 4 o'clock getting up thing is important. But in order to get up at 4 o'clock, we need to go to bed at 9 o'clock, which means we need to turn off our phones by at least 8 o'clock. Things like that. So it's important to have a proper schedule. It's important to eat right. Again, eating right secretes a lot of feel-good hormones in our brains. So eating right, exercising. Why is it important to exercise on a regular basis? Again, because there are secretion of hormones in the brains which make us feel good. These are all natural antidepressants, meaning they all work against your depression. taking care of our basic physical and emotional needs. Like I said, like how you take care of your physical need, your emotional needs also need to be taken care of. Let's say you have a stressful workplace and you're in chronic stress because you're in the same workplace, let's say with the same boss, with the same set of colleagues who trigger you, who stress you out, then it's important to talk about it. It's important to discuss it. You can't keep conflicts to yourself for a long period, because then you are actually negatively impacting your mind. If you start using your mind as a dump, as a dustbin, and you start pushing everything inside you, eventually it's going to burst. And that leads to most of the mental issues that we see, right? It's important to connect socially. We are social beings. We humans are extremely social. So it's very, very important to make proper, trustworthy, and good social connections, right? So connecting with the right sort of people, people who are positive generally, people who are motivated, people who are self-motivated, people who are disciplined, people who are, if you're somebody who likes to be in a group that sort of motivates you to get something done, then you've got to pick people who are like that, people who are non-judgmental, people who are trustworthy. So it's very important to associate with the right kind of people, because the peer group that you associate with or the family that you are with for most of the time during the day definitely has an impact on how you perceive things and how your brain works. So a lot more than we actually think, right? So sometimes it's important to take a back step and just look at the way life is going, to kind of assess and see what's happening with life, where we are headed, right? Because sometimes we're so drawn into the day-to-day workings that we find it's very hard to take a step back and look at life without really judging it, isn't it? So it's periodically, I would suggest all of you to kind of stop, take a step away and look at things objectively and not emotionally, right? You need to manage the stresses, your day-to-day stresses in your life day to day. Do not compound stresses. Do not allow yourself to bottle it up and then, make it burst. Because most women who walk into my clinic have this as an issue. For years and years and years, they'll build resentment, they will build frustration, they will build anger, right? And they'll sweep it all under the carpet. And then one fine day, it just bursts. And when it bursts, it's a huge deal, right? And nobody sees it coming. It's a huge deal for the family as well. So I'm talking from personal, professional experience. Please do not bottle things up. Deal with your emotional conflicts as soon as possible, right? So now post-COVID, there's a lot of, like I said, mental health awareness that's going on, because all strata of the population were affected by COVID, not by the COVID virus in itself, but because of the different economic, financial, social difficulties that arose on a global scale because of the virus, right? So in India, there were mass lockdowns for months together, right? So that in itself initiated so many issues. So it's important that now that things are slowly resuming to become normal and we've slowly started working offline, though for some it's hybrid, it's important to spend some time of the day for yourself. Take a walk, just walk. You don't have to be in a rush. You don't have to be in a hurry. You don't have to time yourself. You don't have to use a pedometer to see how many steps you've actually taken, but just take a walk, preferably a nature's walk. If you have a park nearby that you can go to, even a 10-minute walk would do. A walk where you're in touch with nature, it makes a huge difference. And if you can do this on a daily basis, this in itself becomes meditative, right? Practicing yoga. This is again something that I know everybody's talking about yoga, and there are so many different forms of yoga, and there are so many studios, so many people, but in a sense, practicing it on a daily basis, where there are a lot of breathing techniques that they teach you along with the yoga, I think is a very holistic approach to life in general, right? Meditation, that's something that hasn't come in the slide, but again, an area that's been spoken about very widely, is extremely important, right? So by the term meditation, it can be meditating on your breath. It could be meditating on some form of a higher power or a higher being. It could be some form of a mantra chanting that you're doing. It could be just closing your eyes and just being there and just watching your thoughts. It could be any one of these, right? But whatever it is, please make this as a regular practice along with your exercises, be it yoga, be it any other form of exercise that you would enjoy. But whatever it is, make meditation a part of your life where you assign at least some part of the day solely for this, because the amount of benefits that you can actually derive from meditation, from keeping the mind calm, is enormous. All our physical illnesses, or 99% of our physical and our mental illnesses, would be taken care of by just this, by proper breathing techniques and by some form of a practice where the mind is calmed down, the mind is still, because we're so distracted by the amount of inputs that we have these days. We're so distracted by the world. We're so distracted by the stimulation that we receive, that our minds are like jumping monkeys. It's not just monkeys, but it's jumping monkeys, right? So I find that the number of children who are coming in with attention deficit disorders, the number of working class who have difficulty focusing is increasing phenomenally, mainly because we're constantly multitasking. We're not able to put our minds to anything that we're actually should be at one go. Like, for example, if I'm talking to you right now, my mind should be completely in this. But more often, we find that I'm doing one task here and my mind is millions of miles away, isn't it? So any form of practice that can actually still and calm your mind is extremely important. Maintain a thought journal, right? That's again a practice that can be done on a regular basis, or at least on a weekly once basis, where you sort of write down your most intimate thoughts, like you would tell somebody you really trust. If you don't have that sort of member that you can go to, writing a journal is an excellent way of doing it. Don't bother to read once you've written it. If you want, you can read, tear and throw, that's also fine. Or you can just journal as time goes and just keep it with you, because it's a way of catharsis. Catharsis is a way of pushing out the emotion along with the thought. It's a sort of a release, so that, like I said, you don't dump stuff into your subconscious, right? Turn off Netflix and chill, I would say. I know this slide is saying Netflix and chill, but I personally believe that we've enough and more stimulation that's happening on a visual level, and enough and more stimulation that's happening on the social media, that my suggestion would be to maybe cut off all this and try to go more in tune with yourself. Spend some time for yourself, spend some time with your mind, spend some time for your body, right? And see the difference that it actually brings about holistically to your life. So let's say you have an extremely stressful moment and you're angry, you're upset. What do? A very simple coping technique is the 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique. So in this technique, they're basically getting you to allow your mind to come back, or to focus from the emotion and come back to reality, or come back to the present moment that you're in, right? So mindfulness is something that everybody is talking about nowadays, and there's so many scientific studies that go to show that mindfulness has protective effect, again, in terms of many mental and physical illnesses. So the 5-4-3-2 coping technique would be: acknowledge 5 things that you see around you, right? Especially when you're very stressed. Acknowledge 4 things that you can touch around you. Acknowledge 3 things that you can hear. Acknowledge 2 things that you can smell, and acknowledge 1 thing that you can taste. So when you take the time to use your senses to perceive, automatically your mind calms down. Then you're in a better position to respond to the stressful situation than react. So the tendency for all of us is to react to a situation. So a reaction is something that happens like that. It's very, for most people, it's innate. It just comes like that. It's a pattern of behavior that they've been doing for years and years. And so what happens is you react, and then there's a lot of repercussion. However, when you take a minute to calm down and you convert the reaction to a response, you find that things are so much better, because you're able to assess the situation in a calm manner, in an unemotional manner, and you're able to give the response that is appropriate in that given situation, saving everybody from agony, basically. Right. And again, a few basic exercises that you can do to alleviate stress reactions. Count to 10 before you speak or react. Give yourself the time to calm down. Take a few slow, deep breaths when you're stressed till you find that your body and your mind is declenched and you're calm, unclenched and you're calm. Try and change the environment. If you're in a stressful situation, try and go to a different room. Calm down a bit, count backwards. And like I said, say a quick meditation or a quick prayer, right? The prayer could be it could be to any god or any deity or any form that you believe in, right? It could also be to the cosmos, it could be to a higher power, it could be anything. But the ability to be able to connect ourselves to a being that is higher in itself brings about an innate humility that most of us lack nowadays. Half our issues stem from the fact that we're all very egoistic. Again, I'm very sorry to say this. No offense meant, but it's very hard for us to acknowledge that we are egoistic. So the ability to sort of connect to a power that's higher humbles us, and this in itself brings about a calmness that otherwise is very difficult to look for. Break down problems into smaller parts, taking one step at a time. When you look at a problem as a whole, it becomes insurmountable, right? It becomes very difficult. However, when you break it down into parts, you find that with each time you take a step forward, you're more confident and you're more, you feel good about yourself. You feel like you're moving in the right path. Put on some relaxing music, have a nice bath. If you have the luxury of having a tub and a lot of water, maybe soak yourself in, or just soak your feet in water, right? Take a break. If you have a pet, go out with the pet, talk to somebody. So basically, these are things that you have to otherwise also do when you're not stressed, right? So these are things to do when you are stressed, but I would say do these things even when you're not, so that it becomes a part of your life. So this final slide is to show that I'm proud to be a woman, and I'm proud that I had the chance to kind of talk to all of you, and I'm hoping that I've been able to give you a bird's eye view of what I set out to, and together we can make a big difference, and together we can change the entire world. Forget changing the entire world, but changing us, which is what is more important. Thank you so much for patient hearing.
Can we have question and answer session, ma'am?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, I request participants to unmute yourself if you have any queries. Request participants to unmute yourself and ask any questions you have. Any questions? You can even use chat box also, or you can unmute yourself to post a query.
Ma'am, I have one question. Is my hobbies will help to recover the stress levels? Hobbies of any kind?
Oh, yes, definitely. Any sort of hobby that you can perceive, anything that you're passionate about, if you do, if you work on it on a regular basis, it will definitely de-stress. I know of a lot of people who take up art as a form of therapy, tailoring as a form of therapy, gardening as a form of therapy. So anything, it could be anything under the sun. But yes, hobbies make a big difference. So if you do, please pursue singing, dancing. It could be anything at all.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I have one question. So
Yes.
we've been talking about the mental illness or the stress regarding women, but we can see that during this COVID, even children have been suffering from this kind. Could you just suggest like what could be the measures we as parents can take so that, we can overcome?
Yeah. So, like you rightly said, a lot of, like I said, COVID has actually hit all age groups, right? Right from the pediatric to the geriatric, right? So right from the young ones to the very old people in our society. So yes, children were also very badly affected. I mean, the reasons we know very well: online schooling, online college, everything was online, no socialization, especially at an age where they should be actually going out and playing. Everything was completely shut down. It was a shock to the entire world, isn't it? So one thing is, depending on the age group, try and talk to the child, right? It's important to kind of allow the child to speak. And when the child speaks, it's best that we don't judge the child, we don't mock them, we just allow them to speak, and we create the safe environment for the child to be able to voice his or her own opinion, irrespective of however silly it may seem to us. So talking about issues always help. And the fact that you prove to the child time and again that you're there for the child no matter what will build a trust in the child that the parent is a go-to person. So when the parent becomes the go-to person, you find that a lot of the issues in the child go down. It's only when the parent is emotionally unavailable that the child starts seeking others and other avenues to vent, right? So others could be peers, right? Which depending on the peers' personality, it may work in favor or go against. And other avenues would include taking up substances, etc., etc. So creating a safe space for the child to talk about issues itself is the first step. Once the child brings about any issues, or if you've noticed any behavioral changes, then addressing that depending on the need is what is required. So let's say the child has become very asocial, the child's become very withdrawn, the child isn't eating, sleeping, etc. Maybe just addressing their concerns. What is it that they're worried about? What is it that they're worrying about? So depending on the age group, some children were worried that the parents would fall sick, they would be separated. Some were worrying about hospitalized parents. Some were worrying about their own hospitalization. So many things. So all of us had fears. And depending on the age of the child, it's important to kind of clarify these things for them, to kind of basically give them a structure in this very unstructured life that we're leading right now. That's why I said it's important to have good sleep-wake cycle, to have discipline in terms of a structure. Structuring for children is very important, irrespective of whether they're at home or whether they're going back to school or college. It's important you have a particular time that they get up in, that their day is filled with some sort of an activity. It is interspersed by breaks. So basically, when you give structure to a life's child, automatically the chaos reduces, the child becomes a lot calmer.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other queries from the participant side?
Yeah, somebody's written here. What precautionary measures to be taken during menopause to keep ourselves calm and peaceful? That's a nice question. So menopause is an eventuality in all women's lives, right? So any women who gets her periods is going to also, one day it's going to stop. So knowing that, all of this, what I've told you, will definitely help, right? Meditation, breathing exercises, yoga, going for a walk, de-stressing in general, changing our attitude about life in general. So see, changes in your mind because of the hormonal changes that happens is inevitable, but that doesn't mean that you don't have control over it, right? Some amount of mood swings, some amount of feeling low, lonely, etc. can creep in. But again, anything that comes in is solvable, provided we have the ability to first recognize it and then, sort of address it, right? And there's no shame in reaching out to women of your own age. Form a social circle so that you can discuss these sort of issues as a prevention, I'm saying. Have a nice, kiddie party where all the women get together, talk about, the changes that are happening in your body, talk about your emotional issues, talk about other issues that you may have. So talking in itself helps, because when you talk about issues and when there are people to actually sit and listen to you, or the sort of support that you draw itself will give you the confidence to go through whatever you have to go through, right? The fact that there are people around you to support, just the thought that, oh, I have so many well-wishers, or I have so many people who care for me, that in itself is enough to get most people through. So don't worry about a postmenopausal, breakdown, etc. If it happens, it happens. But when you are generally into a sort of a disciplined life with whatever I said, generally we find that women are far more comfortable.
Any other questions from the participant side? Well, I think there are no more questions, ma'am. Shall we conclude?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it was wonderful session from regarding mental illness about the women. So you focused on the issues or the issues on mental health issues women's face, and the types of mental health issues, symptoms of postmortem depression, and how to overcome the ways in which, through which we can maintain good health. And even you also focused on post-COVID mental wellness tips. So these were the important things which you gave us as an insightful talk, ma'am. On behalf of Rajya Kaligara Sangha and Bangalore Institute of Technology, and we from the team of WGRC, Women's Grievance Redressal Cell and College Internal Complaint Cell, we wholeheartedly thank for accepting this invitation and giving out a wonderful speech on the topic, Mind Your Health. We would be looking forward the same thing even in the future also, ma'am. Thank you so much. And last but not the least, I would like to thank all the HODs, deans, assistant deans, faculty, teaching, non-teaching, without whom this program wouldn't be successful. Thank you one and all. Have a great day, and tomorrow we'll be meeting at 2:30 for another session. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.